you also talk about what it is Thermosystems does and what their place is in the industry?
Well, I'm not really an engineer, but I'll take a shot at it. No, we are a systems integrator. For people that don't know what that is, it's we basically take PLCs and HMIs and program them to do whatever automation we need done. Now, we focus primarily in power and HVAC. This company had an earlier start, and our two owners both worked for them as engineers. The company wasn't doing well. They weren't our owners were not happy there. Instead of
Mhm.
looking for other jobs, they took over the company. So that company was involved in oil and gas and mining. We do nothing in oil and gas anymore. We do have one major mining company. I
Hmm.
won't mention names because I don't know if I can. And they then took the company and built it in their own image. We started working in life sciences. Some major companies like Merck Pharmaceutical that I know I can mention, doing a lot of work in the pharmaceutical industry, doing a lot of work in hospitals and laboratories. We do hospitals from coast to coast, laboratories including the National Institute of Health, Food and Drug Administration. And here's a little tidbit I think everybody will like. We were the company that worked on the cooling for the initial Moderna vaccine. That was a
Wow.
joint project between Merck and Moderna. And because we were with Merck, we backed into doing that work. So that's kind of one of our claims to fame. There are a number of them. Then from there, they started working in district energy. Large organizations with lots of acreage and buildings want to have their own power destiny. And they decide perhaps to go with a microgrid or a cogeneration facility on a campus. Just gave it away. We do a lot of work with colleges and universities, including in your state, Louisiana. We do everything from Princeton University to Stanford on the West Coast and a lot in between. And we do not so much the microgrids and cogens, but we do the controls for them. So you'll find our engineers and technicians working in, say, a chiller facility where they're creating perhaps HVAC, or working the physical plant where they're getting their power and shifting it all over their campuses. A claim to fame in that area, we do business campuses, and a business campus that many people might be familiar with is Hudson Yards in New York City. That's an
Wow.
area of New York that was developed over basically where they store subway cars. They put a platform and built skyscrapers above it. We did the microgrid. So at that point, the company had about, say, 60 employees, maybe a $60 million company. But then things really took off. Our executives ran into some people and was building, and still are, major data centers all over the world.
Yeah.
They
It's
gave us
huge.
some work. They liked what we did. They gave us more. They liked what we did. Then they asked us to go overseas. So we became an international company. We opened up an office in Odense, Denmark, and then recently one in Dublin, Ireland. We're planning on something in Berlin. And following, who else came along but Meta, Facebook. So we've been
Wow.
doing work for them. That's been growing as well. And then a number of other big data center builders. And there it's all about power and HVAC. You think you have a large area where there's a tremendous number of servers and peripheral equipment running. It draws a lot of
Yeah.
power. I believe they draw 2% of a local power grid to power those facilities. They're usually 10 or 12 buildings, years to build them. And we then also are involved in trying to keep the equipment from overheating. So the HVAC part of that is to you have all these computers running 24/7, producing a tremendous amount of heat, and we need to make sure that they don't go offline. So that became the third rung. And recently we announced, at least, I guess it was December or January, that we're getting into semiconductors. We have our first client starting later this year. That is pretty much the same as HVAC. I mean, it's not cooling, but it is airflow. So you have to have a clean room environment for creating semiconductors, and it's got to be dust free. So filtered airflow, and we do a little bit of manufacturing too, left over from our old days. Clients like Nestle's, Sam Adams beer. You got to keep the
Wow.
chocolate from melting and the beer cold, so that's kind of what we do for them.
Wow, that is a very good summary of what you guys do. It's really cool. I mean, and obviously we know that data centers are becoming I'm latching on that because there's a lot of them coming. I used to live in San Antonio, and I remember a bunch of them popping up in and around San Antonio, and hearing about the strain or the mitigations that our local power utility was having to put in place to kind of plan for that. And obviously, the utilities are doing that, but also the data centers themselves, all the work that they do, and y'all's involvement with that. It's pretty cool to see what y'all are doing is so involved with our day-to-day life.
But wait till you see what's coming down the pike, because we're doing a lot of work now in the Midwest, and that area is now being referred to as the Silicon Prairie. So there
Really?
are at least 6 to 8 major data centers that are going to be built in places like Omaha, Nebraska. We're already there, and
Yeah.
then throughout the rest of the Midwest. So it is really a good opportunity for junior engineers and experienced people as well, because there are many different roles, at least with us, to get involved in that. It's going to be with us for years and years and years, because there's so many people using social media and there's such a need for it. And there's something new now called co-location centers, which I call the storage sheds of data centers, because there are a lot of smaller companies that really can't afford to have their own major data center. So these data centers being built and they're renting space, server
Mhm.
space, to mid-sized and smaller companies. So that's just going to just explode that industry, because there are only so many really super large companies that are the size of Google and Facebook. Now you're going to give an opportunity to some of these mid-sized companies to buy in and get an opportunity to have their data center equipment there.
Interestingly enough, I vaguely know what you're talking about because one of my good friends, we tease him about how he doesn't have a real job because he works in the cloud. But he explained that concept to me, and it's so interesting how, I mean, obviously it makes sense. Microsoft and Google would have their own data centers, but even other larger companies don't necessarily have the infrastructure if that's not their predominant thing they do. They still need to have their stuff housed somewhere, and those co-location centers are where it happens. So really cool. Thank you so much for kind of giving an overview of what you do. It honestly sounds like Thermosystems is the place to be, and I really wish you luck. And I know you mentioned that y'all are hiring.
Thank you so much for watching this segment of the Engineering Success Podcast. If you liked it, make sure to check out the other videos down below that are recommended to you. And if you really like the podcast, make sure to subscribe right down there in the middle. We really appreciate it. It's free to you and helps us a lot out. And last but not least, the best way to help the show grow is to comment down below. So leave your comment if you have any thoughts about this segment. Thanks.
I ain't chasing payments, still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.